Fernando Alonso has said some things. I'm going to have to talk to it, yeah, because I love me some Fernando Alonso. You guys have heard me wax lyrical about the dude, his skullduggery, his devil, his ability to enact the most goatiest level of racecraft almost on tap. Please see Checo Perez defence and overtake of that chap at the Brazil Grand Prix last year in inferior machinery. Please see all of 2005 and 2006 versus Michael Schumacher. That fella, the man from Oviedo, Asturias, is absolutely god tier and nobody's going to tell me any different. And this is why this video is going to hurt. I need to preface all I'm about to say with that, because you might be forgiven for thinking otherwise. But on the back of the incident that happened during the sprint shootout yesterday, Fernando Alonso said some things, and I think it's a bit techie. Oh, the humanity, settings, peddlers, NC Paddock, we're going to have to go in on this. So let's look at the incident first, because Fernando Alonso absolutely has to take some blame from me. Being as god tier as he is, it would be a disservice on the chap, an indictment on the Spaniard, for me to say any different. Why are you going into a closing wedge, sir? This is lap 1, turn 1. You have Lance Stroll around your outside, and that is the dude. You are his teammates. You race for his father. Give him a wide berth, please. Both you and Lando Norris should know better than to be that close to that fella who is a walking, talking grenade, who crashes at each and every single opportunity, or at least has done erstwhile. Give him a wide berth, surely, going into turn 1, lap 1. Fernando Alonso, you know better than that, sir. You know better. NC Paddock, I completely agree with you. He's out there, isn't it, sir? Far too kind. I mean, we'll get into it. So go on then. Fernando Alonso finds himself going into a descending wedge, lap 1, turn 1. He's got Lance Stroll round his outside and Stroll squeezes him. But that's not to say that Fernando Alonso had absolute 100% control of his car, because I don't think he did. And this is what's baked into the rules and regulations, right? You must be under control at every single juncture if you don't want to have blame placed at your door. And I feel like Fernando, knowing it was a sprint race, all of them to be fair, but understanding that it was a sprint race, went into turn 1 ever so slightly hot, outbraked himself and induced understeer. Saw him do one of these, super aggressive on the wheel at the last minute, but he didn't have the mechanical grip to take him closer to the apex, even had Lewis Hamilton not been there. So you get your first love tap between the two Aston Martin boys, and then you've got Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton coming hot on the inside. Then you get the second love tap, and it is a tap. It is a tap. And remember, F1 is a non-contact sport, right? Lewis shouldn't be there. He's been aggressive. He's got no stop loss, right? Risk to reward calc. It's the sprint race. What am I going to do? Unless I pull these manoeuvres at turn 1, lap 1, then I'm just going to be involved in a Trulli or Nico Hulkenberg or Kevin Magnussen train. There's no DRS. You've heard George Russell say since there was a super boring race. These type of F1 cars, you can't overtake unless you have DRS. And as soon as you're in a DRS train, then you have no DRS over the chap in front. It's impossible to overtake. And these guys are critically aware of this. Hence the urgency from a Lewis, from a Fernando Alonso, from a Lance Stroll to get it done. But then after the race, Fernando Alonso says something to this effect. I know Lewis won't get a penalty for the incident at turn 1 because he's not Spanish. Well, go on then, Fernando. Let's dissect this, mate, because what do you mean? That's a very serious accusation. Again, reminiscent of Lewis Hamilton all those years ago at Monaco, when he felt like he was being victimised by the stewards and he leveraged an off-trotted out joke by one Ali G, stand-up comedian. Maybe the stewards are victimising me, said Lewis Hamilton. Maybe it's because I'm black. Now, I didn't like that then, and I don't like this from Fernando Alonso now. Here's why. Let me tell you as a person of colour living in the UK, and I don't want to trot out the race card here. You guys don't like it when I get into this bag, but it's important. Fernando Alonso has forced my hand here. Here's why I don't like what Fernando Alonso said. Now, racism and nationalism, xenophobia even, absolutely, of course, are things that exist in the world, but when you leverage those, you better be sure. You need to be categoric, no definitive in your evidence. This can't be conjecture or speculation here. And let me tell you why. Because if you leverage those and you're being speculative, if it's just accusations, Fernando, which I believe it is, what you're doing there is minimizing the case of every single real world victim, actual victim of nationalism, xenophobia and racism. Because what they'll do now, when they're analysing those cases. Do you remember when Fernando Alonso just threw it out there and didn't even know it was true? You undermine the cases of people going through real world nationalism and xenophobia and racism, Fernando Alonso. And that's what I feel this fella has done here. He's thrown it in where I don't think it needed to be thrown in. Why didn't he say this? As an example, because if you ask me, and again, subjectivity, over the past few years, there is one fella called Max Verstappen who has gotten some lenient treatment from the FIA, in my humble opinion. You guys might disagree. Why didn't he throw Max Verstappen in there? Why didn't he say, well, you know what, Lewis, why didn't he say, well, Lewis won't get, why didn't he just say Lewis's name? Why did he need to say Spanish? Why did he say Lewis has gotten some treatment in the past? Why did he need to bring Spanish in there? I think it was unnecessary, you know, chat. I really dislike this. What is descended into there in the name of conjecture and speculation is borderline false accusation. How do you know, Fernando? Even I tell you what else I'm reminded of here. I fell out of love with Serena Williams a while back. Do you remember at the US Open when she was losing to another person of colour, another woman called Naomi Osaka, and she had a go at the umpire saying that she was being victimised because she's a woman? What? How? What are you talking about, Serena? I love, similar to Alonso, I love Serena Williams. So why are you using this victimhood thing at this point? Serena, you are losing. Deal with that. Focus on that, Serena. Why are we talking about misogyny and sexism at this point? There is another woman on the opposite side of the net, Serena. So what? It's not the time. This comment is not apropos. And Fernando Alonso reminds me of that incident, because if we're looking at his most recent penalties, okay, so there's two, right? There's Australia and there's China, and we'll deal with them both in and of their own merit. Let's look at China, for example. The China incident, for the most part, he was interacting with another Spaniard, Fernando Alonso, in Carlos Sainz Jr. You got the penalty for being overly aggressive on your compatriot, for Pete's sake. That's the most recent infraction for which you've been penalised by the FIA. So how does this make sense, Fernando? What do you mean? How comes they didn't penalise? If the prejudice is against Spanish drivers, why didn't they penalise Carlos Sainz Jr. as well at the same time? Does Carlos Sainz Jr. feel the same way as you, Fernando? To leverage this nationalist stat? What are you talking about, Fernando? Not now, sir. F1's got far too many other issues to be dealing with as at May 2024 for us to be throwing out there willy-nilly this nationalism and xenophobia stuff. Checo Perez and Helmut Marko. Helmut Marko said some things that needed addressing properly. That's when you leverage these terms and draw upon these type of cards, right? When you know for a fact, 100% certain. Otherwise, Fernando Alonso, don't leverage it because it doesn't make sense. Riddle me this, Fernando, for the avoidance of doubt. Carlos Sainz Jr. is Spanish. Does he feel the same way as you, that he's been unfairly treated? If not, then why couch the conversation in these terms? For Pete's sake, Fernando Alonso. I love that man. He's a god tier peddler, one of the best that I have ever seen. I spoke to you earlier today about how genius that dude's racecraft and IQ is. Knows where he's on the track each and every single time. Knows his strategic options at hand each and every single time. Racecraft levels, quick as anything. Sent Michael Schumacher off into retirement 05-06. He's god tier, so I'm disappointed then to hear him talking in these terms. Australia. Okay, so we got a cheeky penalty for a non-brake test on George Russell with his arch nemesis Johnny Herbert in the steward box, and I get that that would have put a massive bee in his bonnet, and I understand that he doesn't like Johnny Herbert and Johnny Herbert doesn't like him. They have history. But you know what it is, mate? Sometimes when you do something, Fernando, and the outcome is George Russell half upturned in a dangerous position, sometimes, mate, you got to swallow that one. I don't think you can call victimisation in that. And if you are going to call victimisation, why not use your own name, Fernando? Well, you know what? They don't like me. They've thrown all these penalties at me over the past couple of races, all of which have been unfair. Why did you say that Lewis won't get a penalty because he's not Spanish? What? Have you seen Lewis Hamilton's... He can't even wear bloody jewellery. George Russell took off his helmet the other day and had a bloody hairband, about which the FIA have not spoken, by the way. You remember the kerfuffle a couple of years ago, well, last year even, when Lewis was going to be forced to take out his nose ring that had been welded to his nose skin. What are they talking about? Jewelry gate. Come on, Fernando Alonso. Lewis Hamilton isn't the guy. If you're going to talk about persecution, Lewis Hamilton isn't the name that you want to throw out there, chap. It instantly undermines your conversation. 2021, okay, Silverstone we won't talk about, but the rest of it, you could do anything to Lewis Hamilton and it wouldn't penalise you. Brazil turn 4, lap 48, bloody Imola, Bahrain even. You could do anything to that dude and you wouldn't get penalised practically nigh on the entirety of 2020. So what are we talking about for now? You look mad, sir. You look massively off-piste for saying what you've said there, Fernando. And I, for one, as a Fernando El Plan Alonso fan, as a fan of the man from Oviedo, Astoria, I, for one, am massively disappointed. As a person of colour living his life in the UK, you understand more than ever that you don't throw those terms out there willy-nilly. They need to be ironclad. This isn't the subject of conjecture and speculation, not an off-the-cuff comment, Fernando El Plan Alonso. In May of 2024, let's be honest, F1 as a sport, the sport through which you earn your living, Fernando, has far too many issues for us to be throwing these terms, these very heavy, serious terms, nationalism, xenophobia, racism, out there willy-nilly as if it's banter. Because what you're doing, Fernando, God tier peddler, one of the best that I've ever seen, is trivialising, minimising real-world cases of the aforementioned. Disappointed, chap. Don't do that again, Fernando Alonso. Love you to bits, mate. God tier peddler. But you undermine, you make it difficult for me and millions of Alonso fans all over the world when you do something like that. Don't do that again. No bueno. I said it. No bueno. Prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.